Rh-negative blood is the strangest and least common blood on the planet because it resides in only a small part of the world population. However, it is very strange to find him in the ancient pharaohs of Egypt, when in Egypt Rh-positive always predominates. The mystery increases when it was found in the line of kings and in some world leaders. Several researchers like Walter Emery found that negative HR comes from a people older than we know, called the Los Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. With aspect Nordic, appeared in the Ice Age, after a global catastrophe similar to the Universal Flood about 13,400 years ago. But why exactly did the pharaohs and kings have negative HR? Are they mere coincidences? Would that explain why there are similarities between the Mayans, the Aztecs and Egypt itself? The followers of Horus were the scientists who built the pyramids of Egypt and the ruins of Puma Punko in Bolivia. Were they descendants of the so-called star gods who could be extraterrestrial beings? Human beings have 4 general blood types, A, B, AB and O of the blood types. The is the most common, because it is a universal blood type. However, blood types are divided into 2 groups, negative and positive. The Rh factor is a protein found in human blood that comes from rhesus, which means monkey, so when it was abbreviated we have the acronyms Rh. Well, if the blood has this protein, then you have the positive Rh factor. Obviously, if not, it will be negative. Most people, or about 85%, have Rh-positive blood. Hence the idea that human beings have the same origin from other primates like monkeys. The big question is, and the 15%? And it is in this small group that they keep great secrets and mysteries. Negative hour. A blood that belongs to a lineage that started to leave with the ancient pharaohs in Egypt, and that is perpetually perpetuated in many who today are in power. The big secret of negative HR may be in an Egyptian group, evidently before starting Egypt. This group was called Los Shemsu Hor, or for us the followers of Horus. Researcher Murray, author of the book The Secret of Syria, pointed out similarities between the peoples of America and Egypt. While studying similarities in the buildings and impossible constructions of antiquity, he found something definitely did not expect. He discovered that Egypt's pharaohs and the leaders of the Inca culture had the same blood type. Then he was more surprised, because blood was the negative hour. The most curious thing is that only a small part of the world population has this type of blood. Then he asked himself, what the hell exactly are the kings and the ancient pharaohs? It didn't make sense. It would be like finding a needle in a haystack. Well, in Egypt we had Tutankhamun and Amenhotep III. These perpetuated the negative Rh lineage, although the predominance in Egypt was the opposite. Another interesting point is that the author points out that the pharaohs, the Incas and everyone who had Rh negative had very light skin and a Nordic appearance. That might not explain why was Warakocha portrayed with a different appearance from his people. A tall man with Nordic features? Why are there descriptions of gods that came from the stars or elsewhere? Or from yet another time would they have that Nordic aspect? The book also says that there is a certain interest within traditional archaeology so that the Nordic aspect is not talked about, of the pharaohs. But why? Well, let's move on. Another researcher also found incredible evidence and coincidences. This is Walter Emery, a famous British archaeologist who in 1961 wrote an article for an important magazine, reinforcing the same idea, but brings us other fascinating elements. It tells us that exactly in the 18th dynasty, the pharaohs had type A negative HR and had characteristics Nordic, however, it brings us information about its height that didn't fit in that place, they were very big. It still tells us how those people from that place, stretched their skulls to look like the gods. According to Walter Emery, these pharaohs came from other places, so they had advanced knowledge to create the pyramids, the ruins of Puma Punko, and managed to perform the alignment with the stars of these constructions. It is undoubtedly a very difficult thing to do today, but the ancient civilizations have already possessed that knowledge. Everything is very interesting and there are many coincidences. But there's more. It tells us that negative HR was perpetuated thanks to the lineage between families who practiced incest. Brothers and sisters, for example, in order to keep the noble blood, we can understand that way, they procreated. Can you imagine having a child with your sister or brother? Bizarre, no? Well, but there is something more interesting. The archaeologist points out that this lineage of pharaohs from Egypt were descendants of an older people, the so-called Lost Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. The followers of Horus come from a period of time before Egypt itself, about 13,400 years ago, that is, well before the Sumerians themselves. You see, this is not an invention, because it is registered in the canon of the Museum of Turin. The tablets tell us about the followers of Horus. People with great knowledge, scientific, that came from the north exactly when the catastrophe happened. The same universal flood that appears in more than 230 stories of totally different cultures. Many different. But that we will not see MC Lantra and Gemini da Lacrasau. The followers of Horus brought this knowledge from somewhere in the north perhaps, and from there the dynasties of power began. Dynasties that could be related to some kind of lineage, of gods, perhaps beings from other worlds or realities. A hybrid between them that the Sumerian tablets themselves tell us, with the history of the Anunnaki. The big question is, where are they today? The most curious thing is that the Queen of England, for example, has this negative HR factor. She and many political leaders, kings and people, influential. Is it possible that this lineage that enslaved human beings, remains in power in modern times? Who knows? This topic is quite vast, but I hope you find interesting, because it may be that piece that was missing for many explanations or not, maybe it may have left you more questions than answers, and if so, I'm already happy to make you think, because although there is no free lunch, thinking is free. So we must conjecture, philosophize and think, because knowledge is the only thing that nobody can take away from you. Strong hug and even more.